Good afternoon, who are from Georgia, and good morning to those who are in Europe. I'll try to talk about the regulatory aspects and of balancing services, which is quite important since these are rules and procedures which should be followed while establishing, running, and developing balancing market. So this agenda, I will talk about the structure of the regulation and markets. Also, I will talk about those entities who are involved in the coordination and control. Also, will share my views about the importance of an overall design and those details which should be considered during the process of developing regulation and operating markets, and very important aspects, maybe not for all people present here, but however for part of them, how to start the balancing market. Okay, let's split the all regulation and governance structure of the market in four main layers. One is the regional, which are related to the international and also pan-European, in the particular case, liabilities and commitments. There are certain regulations which should be adopted and regulated on a national level and reflected in the national regulation. It is also worth it to mention that a part of the laws which is adopted by parliaments, national regulatory authorities have a great power in order to regulate the market operation in the country, and they also issue several regulatory documents and act as a system and sector regulators. About this I will talk later in more details. And TSOs also have a quite important role in the regulations which are related to the balancing market operation, since they are developing all technical regulations, regulations, and instructions and rules, procedures, which are afterwards, of course, considered by relevant stakeholders, approved by national regulatory authorities, or even escalated upper and considered and discussed by ENTSO-E, and finally approved by ACER. Continuing with the regional regulation support and harmonization, I would need to admit here that I probably will not talk in details about the content of regulations, and just providing you with a narrative description of the content of these documents, because most of you are here familiar with these regulations. But I would like to highlight three main points which are related to the balancing market regulations on the highest level. And one of them is the Bible of the system balancing. It's electricity balancing guideline. This is a technical document which is developed to standardize the balancing products, market rules across EU, and enable cross-border trading, and making the procurement of reserves more efficient and competitive. The second quite important aspect is the clean energy package, which consists of 4 regulations and 4 directives, and they are also these directives and regulations are making emphasis on the development of energy markets in Europe on the pan-European level and also on like a local level. Some of these regulations are compulsory, you know how regulations are working in Europe. However, there are certain directives which impose liability on the local governments to reflect. Just as example for you, that clean energy package, there is a regulation on the internal energy market for electricity. At the same time, these are directives which guide the local governments to develop local authorities, I would say, not governments, local authorities to develop the market rules for these internal markets. And third is actually not exactly the regulation itself, because the having the cross-border balancing energy platforms are coming from the balancing guideline and clean energy package. But this is quite important aspect because these platforms are becoming later quite important tool and mechanism to harmonize European balancing markets. But this, you know, it was mentioned before, that these are not for capacity, but for energy balancing energy trade. However, this is quite important for the European systems integration and bringing more benefit both to customers, market participants, better said, and system operators. This file is aimed to explain what are the core principles to be transposed into the national law in order to set the proper framework and basis for a balancing market. And one of the most important for all markets is the financial stability. That's why the balancing responsibility is something which is core. Without balancing responsibility, there is no balancing market. And we can even say that the BRPs are those atoms, cells from which the system is created from. This is the smallest part which is necessary for each balancing market. The second step, which should also be understood as important, is the non-discriminatory approach, because the size of the market participants vary from very small to the very big. Some of them are involved only in generation or consumption activities. Some of them are in trade. Others are dedicated to the different activities. Of course, considering the unbundling principles. That's why then non-discriminatory approach is quite important, and later is becoming more important, the aggregation issue, which allows take part in the balancing activities for smaller entities rather than it was in the past. So as I mentioned, it is extending the framework, extend the number of participants in the balancing market, and as a result, increasing the competition. TSO and DSO cooperation was mentioned by Hans, and I want to repeat here. It's becoming more important, especially when from the vertical integrated system we moved to the horizontal system, when we transferred a lot of liabilities, and we have a self-dispatch system, and a lot of liabilities goes to the BRPs and market participants. TSO and DSO cooperation is quite important in order to keep the system, especially having quite a big amount of so-called distributed generation facilities later. That imbalance settlement harmonization is also quite important, and we see that in Europe they are moving toward the 15-minute settlement period, which first of all should be harmonized among all countries, and this is quite important requirement. Otherwise, it would be impossible to synchronize the markets and get the benefit from balancing services and balancing capacity sharing. On the one hand, on the second hand, is fairer or fair approach, because this dilemma when somebody was over generating during 15 minutes, half an hour, and under generating during another half an hour, the imbalance was zero. However, the activation of up and down regulation had happened, and there was always a way how to settle this power. And this approximation of the settlement period to the real time as much as possible is important, and it is also is required by the regulation. And cost recovery and transparency, last but not the least on this slide, is establishment of transparent and non-discriminatory cost recovery mechanisms for TSOs. Balancing activities. It means that the balancing activity should not be subsidized, and it is again kind of answer to the questions which we were discussing in the previous section about the compensation of down regulation. In this particular case, if it costs money, it should be compensated by the certain to the certain entities. However, this should be done on the market based, and there's always the very simple choice. Either you have a vertical integrated system and protective approach during a certain period of months or years, or you choose the free independent market, getting all benefits from the competitive and liberalized market, but at the same time assume all risks which are related to this kind of trade. And now, if you let me, I will talk about the design of and operational features of this balancing market, which are subject of national regulatory authorities approval. And first of all, the standardized products. Again, this is very important to have one standard product, which first of all will consider the time frame of activation or deactivation of the product duration of the product, and so on. And all this stuff, again, to make it competitive, this market, we need to have them also. We need to have them strictly regulated. And new products always should come with the agreement with those systems where with whom you are going to exchange or share this product. Another important issue is the separate trade of the balancing capacity and balancing energy. And this because balancing capacity is the commitment and security of the system. However, balancing energy activation is based on the merit order, and this separation allows to operate those platforms which were mentioned before, this balancing energy platforms. So the common merit order list is also important aspect in order to get the product at least cost price and be able to optimize the system. And marginal price system is also quite important, and all these are covered by market regulations and are the key aspects to be mentioned and approved through the regulation. And the gate closure time is also again, it should be harmonized and within one area where this trade is happening. Otherwise, it will be asynchronously managed. And it, first of all, it could not be coupled, this one case, and second, it is impossible to have a fair competition. So, as we mentioned, there are different layers of management and cooperation, and in order to get the success, you need to have an integrated and coordinated operation and activities of these three pillars of each market, and balancing market is not an exception from this. Is that the national regulatory authorities, TSOs, and DSOs and market operators. All these entities have their regulatory framework. In some cases, these are overlapping. I mean that they need to do all these activities commonly and synchronously. In some cases, the regulation sets the specific requirements for each of the entity. However, their coordination and their activity synchronization is very important, because the conflict with them and competition between these entities will never bring success to any market in the world. And the purpose of this slide is to show that when we say the regulation, what does it mean? That there are a set of documents which need to be developed for the proper operation of balancing market. And the development and approval of these documents is subject of national regulatory authorities or TSOs, or the fruit of their mutual cooperation. So these documents are aimed to create the transparent and standard environment for operation of the market, for behavior of system operator, distribution system operator, transmission system operator, market participants, whether they are performing role of only solely BRPs, or also they are BSPs as well, and these kind of documents and regulations are quite important, and they are not easy to develop. They are not easy to monitor, and they are not easy always to fulfill. However, this is a target, and this package is needed to be developed by all countries which are aimed to establish the right and proper operating balancing market. And here you see that some of the boxes are highlighted in different colors, just to show that the not only internal rules and procedures are important, and also the transparency is quite important, but cooperation with neighboring countries is also quite necessary for proper operation. This is not just a I would say the fashion to integrate as more markets as possible. This is crucial. This is vitally important to get the integration with neighboring country, to get power from neighboring country, to get services from neighboring countries, and exchange and supply your services and supply your energy. Because each system has its own specific, each system has its challenges and benefits, and these benefits should be shared, and challenges should be targeted with assistance of the neighboring countries. This is important, and this importance is seen by EU countries. That's why they are gradually transforming and merging, coupling their market, merging their capacity procurement, balancing capacity procurement platform, integrating more advanced capacity allocation tools and mechanisms, and that okay, that is. This list could be continued. That's all. Now let's talk about the single and documented overarching design obligation. What I mean under this statement, we in the previous file we saw the list of all documents or regulations which are creating the framework of the balancing market and balancing capacity markets and cross-border exchange. However, you still need some kind of framework in which you need to develop all this regulation. It can be done on the free way. First of all, you need to develop the clear design of your market. How do you see your market, or how do you see the cooperation with neighboring systems? And after that, you develop all this regulation. And in this regulation, you put your needs, your abilities, and at the same time, you put the target toward which you are moving to. So I need to admit that all kind of changes, all kind of step forward toward the better market design, the better operating balancing market is always some kind of trade-off and leaving the so-called comfort zone. But this is an exercise which should be done permanently, constantly, and you should never lose the star, like a North Star. I just decided with my colleagues to call it the North Star, some kind of guide which used to help our ancestors to find a right way from the during their trips, and now it should help us to find a way from the current situation toward a better one. This diagram probably is not visible properly. That's why I just create a special slide where you can see it. This is something which you probably know, how the system, how the balancing system market is operating, ancillary services and balancing markets. What is a time frame for procurement, activation, and settlement. Then if you will have any questions regarding this, we can discuss it during Q&A part. However, I again want to admit that all these issues are quite detailed and transparently and clearly described in the balancing market rules, either in the BRP and BSC agreements, which are also part of regulation. And as I said, this you should always try to get out from this comfort zone towards the improvement. So, and during this period, you should analyze your situation, which is the current regulation, what should be improved, on which level it should be improved. It should be improved only on TSO, TSO BRP or TSO BSP agreement level, or on the instructions and procedures level, or on the national regulation level. And when we are challenging some kind of boundaries and borders on the international or EU, for us could be international, for European member countries it would be EU level, then escalate this toward toward EU regulators and EU and ENTSO-E and European lawmakers. But again, what I said that but I said it before, and it is always some kind of trade-off required. You cannot create a system where everybody is happy. However, everything should be based on a cost benefit analysis and motivated by social welfare. But when we are talking about in general what should be done, the details should not be ignored, because we can describe quite a beautiful high-level model, but when we dig deeper into details, we find challenges, we find issues which should be addressed, and they should be addressed not always at the easiest way, but sometimes they are quite complex. They need quite complex decision and steps to be taken. But at the same time, you should not deviate from the common, from that star. Please keep your eye on that star. Otherwise, you will need to go back and start the process from the beginning. So let's go through this list, if you don't mind. The price regulation. Yes, are there countries where we have a balancing price regulation? Yes, there are such countries, but this should be done in a right way. Just setting the fixed cap is not a solution. You need to have a dynamic in the pricing. This is always important, because if you set the cap price, fixed price, you will cap day-ahead market price, you will cap bilateral market prices, you will cap imbalance prices, and by the end of the day, it will bring you to the situation when the system, the market, is not operating properly. You don't have competition, and there's no initiatives for the low imbalances, and so on and so on. The second issue is that make the pricing method complex or not. Yes, you can design a special, very quite complicated and sophisticated formula, but again, you should be focused that it should be on that it's transparent, and this price is covering the cost. Exactly, it does not make the price too high, higher than it costs, and lower than it cost. And the third part is the ancillary reserve products are also important to have in mind to avoid undersupply of overpayment. What does it mean, the ancillary services product? This is the ancillary capacity. So you know that countries are later on going towards common capacity markets. This was done in Baltics. They even developed special software which is going to operate this market, and there's always the risk of over procurement or under procurement. There are risks of over procurement because the market stays without energy, but under procurement means the system stays without capacity. That's why they are developed a certain market-based solutions, and this also should be clearly and transparently described, first on the high-level regulations, where the approach and some limitations should be imposed, for example 70% rule, and on the other hand, the internal procedures, algorithms also need to be developed properly in the regulations, in order to that all market participants, all service suppliers see what is the algorithm of the procurement, of the selection, of the capacity allocation or capacity procurement, and so on. Also, the bids threshold. If we set the very big bids, just more than 5 megawatts is the minimum, it means that only those who have a 5 megawatt flexibility can take part. And especially this is important to mention during the flexibility service supply from the distribution grid and from retail consumers. And investment in communication and activation also is to be considered, because balancing market, one of the purposes of balancing market is to send, it was mentioned, and Misha said about this, that proper price signals are important, and price signals are also bringing investments. So, and this investment should be covered. You cannot do the better job with less price during certain period of time, by all means, but this is also quite important, that regulations are covered, and this is related to the price capping principle as well. And so long-term targets setting is also quite important. The metering code. Here I mentioned this because metering is not the balancing, probably mentioned in the balancing regulation itself, but metering code, which is quite important document for proper operation of balancing market. First of all, because it speeds up the settlement process, this one. Second, it's also help to help the market participants to get their imbalance data on time and take reactive actions if necessary. And also, it is important for TSOs to keep the financial stability of the system, because if this is the one of the market participants is in a high imbalance, which is not covered by his reserve, his guarantees or other, this action should be also taken properly, because balancing market financial stability, which we mentioned before during at the beginning of this presentation, is quite important. And so we can admit that among the regulations which are regulating balancing market, the metering code, metering regulation is also quite important. Collaterals and timely settlements. So collaterals, as usual, are regulated by the BRP and BSP agreements, TSO and BRP agreements in general. However, the market rules are also important in order to set the framework for this. So now we found why the agreements, which you remember this big slide where all these documents were and regulations were mentioned, why they are important, because they are regulating so actions which are maybe micromanagement on the micromanagement level. However, they are quite important. How to hear and listen to market participants adequately and fairly. And these are regulations which are important. The dispute resolution aspects, national regulatory authorities, market monitoring regulations, which also are quite important. And these procedures should be described in order, first of all, let the market participants to express their concerns and do it in a easiest way first, and second, do it in a way that don't bother national regulatory authorities every second day. At the same time, don't let the TSOs or DSOs to block the approach of market participants toward national regulatory authorities. And this also should be clearly described in the regulations. And non-discriminatory imbalance responsibility, also important. You cannot impose imbalance responsibility only on one party. and don't one market participants, and don't do this for another market participants. Yes, there are some cases, for example, PPA agreements, where imbalance responsibility is not the direct responsibility, financial responsibility of the specific power plant. Why? Because this power plant is in the support, under support mechanism, but this money should be still paid, first of all, and this should not be paid from the TSO tariff, and you impose some mechanism, for example, public services, from where this money is paid is compensated, but never saying that, okay, Misha is not paying, but Hans is paying, and vice versa. This is not right approach at all. On the wholesale level, on the balancing market level, you have an equal regulations for everybody, and then when you go out of the market, you find a way how to improve your support mechanism, how you improve your RES integration mechanism in a way that certain power plants are not financially liable. I mean that maybe they should be financially liable, but they are compensated for this. New transparency can show pre-market, pre-riding behavior, and the new transparency platform, you see that it was developed, the new transparency platform, on an EU level, but the transparency is another challenge. Again, first of all, it shows our market participant how market is operating, this one, and second, again, this is motivating people to develop their own strategies and their own behavior based on the data that is available for them, and also it is helping to people, to market participants, to feel not to feel discriminated because they see the whole picture. And the 12 is the system comes without redistribution and socialization effects, but that transparency helps. This is again saying about that transparency shows that where money comes and goes, comes from and goes to. And this is last slide for details. This is that if you make some kind of design how the balancing market will work, it will be successful, or there will be some challenges, or it will the cost which we estimated before, it will be higher or lower, is not possible to do this. However, you will see the risks which are in place and try to find a mechanism to mitigate this risk. And of course, by all means, always before the go live, there is a dry run, but dry run is not for changing your mind. The dry run is for improving the mechanism, finding the mitigation tools for those aspects which will show up when you run the market. Because sometimes people make a dry run, see some issues, challenges, and they say, okay, we are not ready for the market. That's not true. You need to find a way, and in the regulation is, again, as I mentioned, regulation is permanently changeable, and this is nothing bad when you implement one mechanism. You see that it's not working, and you should never be sorry for this. Okay, how could I could do it better. I should know this. It would work in such way. No, you could not know everything beforehand. That's why you need to permanently monitor the effect of the operation of balancing market, effect of changes, and if you see that it is not as good as you were thinking, find a way how to improve it, not a way how to cancel it. No excuse for cancel, no excuse for stepping back, but find a way to improve it. So, and there are other aspects which are also quite important, that the SCADA system, local testing and dry run, which I mentioned. Let me go to the last part of the presentation, how to start. Yes, I mentioned several times that the starting of the balancing market is necessary. We need the balancing market for many aspects, but the question, how to develop these regulations. So there are ways that you can develop it from the scratch, or you just copy paste. None of this is the right answer, because develop from the scratch, first of all, you will spend more time in doing this. You will repeat the mistakes and errors which made those people who are already operating balancing the market longer than you. But at the same time, if you copy paste, you will miss those aspects which are not applicable for your system. That's just very simple example. The hydrothermal system, just a mix of hydrothermal system, cannot use the balancing market rules of the system where hydro prevails significantly, or thermal prevails significantly. Just a very simple example. However, there are a set of standard features which all market rules, all procedures should have: the balance responsibility, the balance responsible party, balance service provider, balancing capacity product, balancing energy products, individual settlement period, balancing capacity price calculation, and so on. And financial guarantee mechanism is necessary because it's market, and market needs financial security. However, you can still apply the tailored field solution, like you can, instead of the standard balancing products, you can get some of them, but at the same time, you can develop your national products with a special specification on a temporary way. So you can gradually reduce the individual settlement period. Yes, so you can start from 1 hour and reduce it down to 15 minutes if you need time to do this, but you still need to do this. Then gradual deregulation of capacity price. Yes, you can set certain regulations on capacity price on the initial stage, again, not capping, but regulating. This is two different aspects. And then go to the full competition when there will be developed enough products for this, enough supply for that kind of product on the market. You can deregulate it in order to prevent any kind of abuse of the market power from any of BSP. But at any stage of the developing the regulation, it should be geared toward further market liberalization. Yes, if you decided to go to half an hour settlement period, then you go back to 1 hour. Actually, it means that all these your efforts were thrown to the river, as we say in Georgia. And this is slide which again talks about the decision where to start. I called it chicken and egg dilemma for the balancing market. And this dilemma are facing a lot of countries who decide start or not start the live operation of balancing market. And again, here is not a solution, one solution for it. But what is the critical? It means that you need to have a minimum requirements which are necessary in order to be able to run the balancing market. You will never be able to develop the products, the systems, the capacity of the market participants or other requirements at the, for example, EU level, which is currently available on EU, and then run the market. You need to start with something because they started with simple steps, and now you see how developed are they, and the same, and still they are facing challenges, and they still are looking for improvements. And you, being a beginner, newbie in this area, you need to start. And there are some kind of rules which you probably can use as a kind of the template, yes, and speed up the process. Just as very simple solutions. Yes, in order to buy some time, instead of register existing market participant request the application, and you should start with less bureaucracy, because people still will be irritated with this changes, as I said, that leaving their comfort zone. And if you create additional barriers, additional issues, it will still be not pro-market attitude, and allow people to be scared more than they should be from the market opening. That's why you can take the list of market participants and register them all as BRPs, and then they will decide to whether to transfer their balancing responsibility to third party or not to do this. At the same time, instead of asking them to come and sign all papers, all documents, you just approve the standard agreement, and everybody will be some kind of ad hoc agreement, not ad hoc, not ad hoc, I forgot the word. Anyway, the agreement to which you join automatically. Yes, and this is the same case with balancing capacity. Yes, you have power plants or customers who are providing you some flexibility services. That's why I registered them as BSP. You don't need to test them because you know that they are operating. Then when new will come and you don't know how this is able to provide this service, you can test it. But here you are quite happy with this power plant providing you the services. Just keep doing this. And at the same time, there's also quite important that the balancing market is not to mitigate the price. As I mentioned, that you cannot predict how the market will operate. That's why you cannot use the balancing market for price decrease. Again, you cannot say ask those entities who are receiving remuneration for balancing energy, for balancing capacity, to share this with others. This is not right. Otherwise, the initiative will be lost. And this, I just before I was talking about what to write in, what should be allowed by regulation, what should be implemented by regulation. And here I have three don'ts, which I say that regulation also should not allow this. Again, don't use this balancing market to mitigate the prices. Do not seize balancing market income from public and even supported power plants, because you have a solar power plant, you have a wind power plant or hydropower plant, which are getting some PPA price or CFD price. That's okay. But if they decide to enter and contribute to the flexibility of the system, leave them alone. Don't take this money, because competition on that market is also quite important. And do not accept anyone from their balancing responsibility free of charge, but reduce their benefits from the market. What I mean, so yes, probably somebody will be compensated the imbalance, but at the same time, this somebody should know that while he's requesting for some benefits from support and some greenhouse conditions, he should not be able to get the benefit which others are having from the market. It's also quite important. You cannot say that, as I say, that they cannot eat only raisins from the pudding. So that's the rule, and regulation should also say it clearly. Either you are the potential market participant and assume all risks and get all benefits, or you are under the support scheme, and in these conditions you are getting what you need in order to have a even financial situation, but no benefit from the market situation. Okay, that's all for the moment.